I would like to read a portion from my book with Lee Boyd Malvo, Diary of the DC Sniper. Malvo and I wrote the book together in 2012. I think it's very timely given the fact that he is looking to have his sentence remanded to a lower court to decide whether or not he's going to receive the possibility of parole. So, in his introduction in the book, it's a 2-page long introduction, he explains basically what precipitated the shootings as they would happen in October of 2002. We were parked in a very large parking lot of a shopping center in Montgomery County, Maryland, or somewhere around this area. The Chevy Caprice was nestled between 3 cars. The trunk of the car was in direct line of sight with the front door and parking lot of a Michael's craft store. The first order of business was to plot out routes of the immediate vicinity once the shot had been taken. Muhammad and I sat a laptop to decide which of the 4 routes presented the least traffic, was the shortest to our next destination, and so on. Once we had selected the route and its alternate, Muhammad popped the trunk. Held fast by bungee cords, the trunk was opened about 2 inches. Muhammad lowered the seat and slid over into the back. The backrest of the back seat was hinged on 2 hooks, of which he simply lifted off to access the trunk. The bracing for the backrest had now been removed. First he positioned the backrest and spare tire in the trunk. The spare tire was used as a handrest while shooting. Having positioned these items, Muhammad then assembled the AR-15. We would spend roughly 2 to 3 weeks of reconnaissance before settling on an area to strike. While Muhammad got settled in the trunk, it was my job to ensure that no one happened to be sitting in cars around us or loitering nearby. The inside of the trunk was painted the same exact shade as the dark blue car itself. A passerby would have had to be keenly observant to notice. A 3-inch by 2-inch incision was made, cut into the trunk right under and adjacent to the key lock. This provided a total of 5 inches, which was sufficient space. The rifle stayed within the enclosure of the car, which acted as a natural suppressor to muffle the sound. Muhammad would always be in the center, so he always had to do was swivel left or right to select a target. The entire setup was derived from an Irish Republican Army manual. Muhammad simply had to modify it. "Do I have a go?" Muhammad asked. "No," I replied. A man a few cars down was unpacking items into his minivan. Once the man left, I gave him the all clear. When I had the go-ahead, immediately a shot rang out. The bullet punched a hole into the glass in front of a Michael's craft store. Muhammad had missed. The young man he was aiming for was hopping, causing Muhammad to either pull up or mistime the shot. The fact that he missed was never discussed. He returned from the trunk and slid back into the driver's seat and followed the directions on the map. I then hopped over into the back seat and placed the backrest back upon the hooks. Next, I disassembled the AR-15 and placed it back into the bag. That was the first shot. Before going to bed, Muhammad said, "There would be no more missed opportunities." Lee Boyd Malvo. So, according to Malvo, obviously these shootings were extremely pre-planned. In fact, obviously there was time to think about what they were about to do and decide whether or not they were going to do it. On the first few days, they shot several people, so obviously there were not 2 to 3 weeks of reconnaissance on those alternate shots. But it goes to show the calculating nature that they had and the time that they had to not do the shooting, which is probably more important as we look forward to his possible retrial. There were many, many times, as you can read within the diary, that Malvo had to either escape the plan or decide not to pull the trigger. In both cases, he chose to do the worst of those choices. In fact, at one time, Muhammad had slipped dating a white woman, which was contrary to the beliefs that he had told to Lee Boyd Malvo. But Malvo instructed John to leave the woman because he had to decide what was best for their mission. It is also interesting that on the tarot cards that were left, the handwriting was that of Lee Boyd Malvo. The phone calls that were made to the police or authorities, the voice was Lee Boyd Malvo. Now, yes, we can surmise that Muhammad was smart enough to ensure that his voice was not known. However, we also have the opportunity, while Malvo was making these phone calls to police, to actually confess or tell exactly who it was that was making the decisions here. But he chose not to do so. So there are many facets within even this very first chapter or preface to the book that detail the choices that Malvo had, and yet he chose to do the very wrong choices, either injuring or killing other people who were completely innocent and unaware they were there. Thank you for listening.